Now, you could say that it was a candid interview. It was certainly an exclusive chat with Nigeria's President, Muhammadu Buhari, broadcast to a global audience on Arise News. One of the few times Mr. Buhari has spoken directly to the press, although the interview wasn't live, but was pre-recorded. Well, looking fairly relaxed, Mr. Buhari spoke against the background of deepening insecurity and rising violence across the country, growing unemployment, worsening inflation, and an economy still recovering from a punishing recession. He said he would take a tougher approach towards insecurity, particularly against bandits and criminal gangs in the northwest and separatists in the southeast, warning that the police and the army had been given powers to be ruthless. If Nigerians wanted to attract jobs and investment, he said, then they must behave, as no one is going to invest in an insecure environment.
Nigerians would say what they want. They want their own republics. They don't even talk of the resources, how we can disengage ourselves, how we are going to share what we have invested when we are together, how are we going to share it out, how fair are we going to be to ourselves. And try and see our population, our young population. If we cut ourselves into pieces, can we win the confidence of investors, real investors, people to come and build factories, employ people, produce goods and services, and then earn from taxation, from employment? I don't like the way Nigerian elite is allowing ignorant or careless people talking all over the place. We have so much to learn and so much to guide together than to try and disorganize people's way of thinking that if you become a republic, things will be all right. Let them see how long it took us between 1960 and now, how we came about. We have consolidated it. The federal government, no more vacancy, it's full. Go to any state governor and ask him now to give you a contract or to give you a job. He will tell you there is no vacancy. The same thing with local government. So you may have a good degree, but you may die without having a job. Why? Because nobody is going to invest in an insecure environment. So I told them, I said they should tell the youth that if they want jobs, they will behave themselves, make sure Nigeria is secure so that people can come and invest. Nigeria is resourceful, people know it. We are a rich country. God has endowed us. But nobody can bring, look at today, like 200 buses bought by the former governor of Lagos. Some of these boys went and burned the vehicle. The governor made an album, came and I took the album and put it aside. I said, go and tell them to work. Who will go and invest his money in an unstable environment? Nobody will. It's just common sense. So you behave yourself, you make Nigeria secure, and people will invest.
President Buhari. Well, for reaction and analysis to Mr. Buhari's exclusive interview on Arise News, I'm joined now in the studio by the Arise News analyst, Mahmud Jega, and by the former editor of the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, Dr. Austin Maho, currently facilitator at the National Open University of Nigeria. And from our Overflow studio, I'm also joined by the public affairs analyst Chibuzo Okereke, convener of the National Political Equity Movement in Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start with you, Mahmud Jega. You obviously watched that interview, as we all did. He seemed pretty relaxed, fairly comfortable with doing a chat. Why does the impression persist that he's a bit of a wooden character who's a sort of ramrod military person who doesn't smile or is not warm to the touch?
That was certainly the impression, and it was not helped by the fact that the president didn't give a lot of interviews, especially to the local media in the 6 years that he has been president. He spoke at various times to some international media. And this is the first time that I remember that he has sat down for such a long period, 45 minutes, to speak to a local television station, quite relaxed, as you observed, and he fielded all the questions. I think the interviewers raised all the important issues of the day. Sometimes maybe he didn't want to answer directly. He wanted to keep certain things to himself. But still, he said many interesting and important things, and it also helped a lot to disabuse the notion that he is stiff and withdrawn and all that. And the hope is that with this very good outing, we will see much more of him in the local media in the weeks and months to come.
And Dr. Austin Maho, what stood out for you in that interview?
Yeah, what stood out for me was, I looked at the interview 3 prongs. One, the disposition of the interviewee, which Mahmud Jega has highlighted. The president was relaxed. But in relaxing, he stuck to his gun on several issues, which I hope in the course of the discussion we have the time to highlight. And equally, the interviewers. You know, normally in an environment like that, when you are interviewing the #1 citizen of the country, there's a measure of self-censorship you may box yourself into, because you don't want to ask some question which you may feel...
although, of course, that's an opportunity to ask those tough questions.
Yes, but that's why I says you may resort to self-censorship, because you, like he said, this is the first time the president is granting an interview of this nature since the beginning of his 2nd tenure. So if he gave that opportunity to Arise TV, I'm sure Arise TV would not want to close the door. They want to manage.
You mean going forward?
Yes, going forward. Yeah, it's a rare privilege.
Nevertheless, of course, the people who were doing the interviews are seasoned correspondents.
Sure,
I mean, you have Ndukor Babuna, who's been in the business for a long time. You have Shegu Adeniyi, who's a first-class journalist, Ruben Abati,
and the young lady.
The lady.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that I appreciate the fact that they were able to ask the tough questions. Tough questions across board on security, the contentious issue of grazing reserve, IPBO, Twitter. At least they asked the question, but it's the president's response that I hope we'll be able to talk about in the course of the interview.
Okay, well, let's go to our overflow studio and speak to the public affairs analyst Chibuzo Okereke. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do you make of that interview? I mean, there have been some suggestions that he might have been let off a little bit easily. What do you reckon? Right. Okay. Well, he's obviously talking, but we can't hear him. So let me go back to Mahmud Jega. There were a lot of. Let's start taking the points one by one. I mean, there were a lot of issues that were raised. Obviously, the one that Nigerians were most focused on was probably starting with security. What are your thoughts on how he responded? He said he was going to paraphrase him, leap down on a great height on bandits and so on in the northwest and separatists in the southeast.
He didn't say very precisely what he intends to do about Boko Haram, about the northwestern bandits, or even about IPOB in the southeast, except to sound a general warning to all of them and to promise tough action coming. Personally, I think that is okay. You know, you don't reveal all your security plans on television. So sometimes he tried to veer off, like in the case of Boko Haram, he talked about how poverty has aggravated the situation and makes recruitment easy and fighting it difficult. But he refused to be specific as to the military and other measures he will take. The same thing about the Northwestern bandits. He promised that in the weeks to come, we are going to see a lot of changes. That means certain security measures are in the offing. Now, we don't expect him to say what they are on television, but we expect to see them on the ground in the weeks to come. In the case of IPOB in the southeast, he reiterated his what was called the threat that he will speak in the language that they understand. But he also said other things about how the elite who knew that this was not a worthy cause are not speaking out and distancing themselves from what is happening. So
okay, well, let me ask you to just hold that thought. We're going to come back in a minute, but we have to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our analysis of President Buhari's exclusive interview on Arise News. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Enyegolu. Now, as you might have heard, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has given an exclusive interview to Arise News, which has been broadcast to an international audience in a television and online simulcast. It took place in one of the opulent meeting rooms at the Aso Rock Presidential Villa in Abuja, and Mr. Buhari appeared to range with relative ease across several contentious issues, including rising insecurity, deepening unemployment, diminishing foreign direct investment, and achieving balance in his political appointments.
Talk about talking to the people of Northeast in the language they understand. That is the whole, there's a crisis around that language. So it shows that because you were a former military man, you are talking about using force to restore order. But it's understood in another way, especially given what happened last week.
The problem of the Northeast was very difficult. The governor, the present governor, is working very hard. He's taking a lot of risk. And I asked him, this Boko Haram, is it our people, is it Nigerians or people coming out? He said they are Nigerians, most of them. They are Nigerians. As I said, the only way we got them around was that you can't kill innocent people and said God is great. That worked very well, but I think we have a problem of unemployment. We have a problem of a lot of youth looking basically for what to eat, not even to talk of accommodation or dress. The level of poverty is almost unimaginable. I will give you one example of recent. 2 governors from the Southwest came to tell me that the cattle rearers in some of the forests there have killed farmers while their cattle were eating on their crops. So I told them, you campaigned to be elected, and you are elected. He said, yes. I said, go back and sort out yourselves. Because there has been a system, as all of us here could recall, even your local government, when there are security at each level, at local government and state, it consists the traditional leaders in that area who have been there for generations. So they know all the crooks.
President Buhari. And with me in the studio, Arise News analyst Mahmud Jega, the former editor of the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, Dr. Austin Maho, currently facilitator at the National Open University of Nigeria, and from our Overflow studio, the public affairs analyst Chibuzo Okereke, convener of the National Political Equity Movement in Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And let me come to you, Mr. Okereke. Apologies, we couldn't hear you the last time, but I believe that we've got you back now. Let's try and bring you up to speed because everyone else has kind of done their opening analysis. What do you make of the president's interview, the way that he responded, given the enormity of the problems facing Nigeria and the fact that he's the one in charge?
Thank you, Charles. I want to congratulate Arise News for the bold step. And let me say that I saw 4 presidents of Nigeria today in that interview. I saw the president of Nigeria who missed a big opportunity to unite the country with that interview. I also saw a president of Nigeria who appreciates the level of challenges we are having, but seemed to communicate a sort of handicap or excuse. And also importantly, I saw a president of Nigeria who has now chosen to break the barrier of communication with the people, because presidential aide once told Nigerians that President Buhari has his own style of communication and that he has chosen to communicate through the aides instead of communicating to Nigerians directly. I also saw a Nigerian president who, through that interview, chose to put all of Nigerian youth into one basket and described that they should behave. Whereas we have a lot of young people who are doing great, pushing advocacy to unite the country, building bridges around the country. So what is interesting is that we have started a conversation. Now there is a team that can have access to the president and be able to ask important questions. But however, I think this first series was an opportunity missed by the president owing to the degree of challenges we are facing across the country. And that calls for a realization to the presidency that Nigerians are not all about the opposition. The voices you hear is not just the voices of the opposition. There is a voice of the Nigerian people whose aspirations are concerned, begging for presidential authority, presidential leadership to provide succor, for the people.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your analysis there. Let me bring you in, Dr. Austin Maho. Do you think he made a justifiable argument to people who feel excluded or marginalized in parts of Nigeria, in the southeast, for instance, and the youth, as Mr. Okereke was pointing out?
Yeah, certainly not. It's just like Mr. Okereke has pointed out. It was a missed opportunity. What's the job of a president? A president is supposed to inspire, to tell people that there is hope, even in the darkest of time. Not to, what came out for me in most of the interview, you can say, okay, the president had a good interview generally, but what came out for me is that he reinforced his persona as someone who is unbending. And most of the statement that has been coming from the presidency, he came out to reaffirm them. His position on grazing route and grazing reserve, his position, he didn't take back his statement on speaking to certain people in the language he understood, and the attempt, which to me was to make it seem as if the whole of the Southeast are IPOB sympathizers, which is certainly not. You should, as a president, you should be able to, having identified the problem, you should be able to profile solution to the problem, not just looking at the problem as it is, but look beyond the problem and identify those who are causing the problem and use carrot and stick to deal with the problem. Describing IPOB or the whole of, because there's a statement he made which has gone viral on social media about the IPOB being a dot in a circle. What does that mean? They have nowhere to run to, which means all you are after is to make sure they are crushed. Such language, to me, and to a lot of people who I have read their comment on it, is not reconciliatory. At this point in time, why I agree with Mr. Okereke that it's a missed opportunity, he should have used some reconciliatory tone, irrespective of the fact that, look, there's a need for the presidency to stand firm, to be firm in his attempt to bring the insurgency in the southeast to a close. But you should use some reconciliatory tone.
Yeah, well, I mean, his people would probably argue that that's what he did, because he identified IPOB specifically, although IPOB say they are not the ones who are doing this. But let me bring you in, Dr. Mahmud Jega. Okay, I'm told we've got less than 20 seconds, so I'll hold that thought and we'll come back to you. I was given the impression I had 2 minutes, but now it's 20 seconds. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our analysis of President Buhari's exclusive interview on Arise News. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniegolda. Now, lots of reactions from around the world to the Arise News exclusive interview with Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. In the pre-recorded chat, Mr. Buhari, among other things, promises to be ruthless with bandits and criminal gangs in the northwest and to crack down on insecurity as a whole, admitting that no one is going to invest in an insecure environment. He also talked about the economy and unemployment, merit-based appointments, and what he was going to do after his term expires in 2023. But he wouldn't be drawn on that Twitter ban that continues to generate controversy around the world.
Especially given what happened last week when you spoke about the Southeast, IPOB and all that. One, the controversy of Twitter. When is the government going to lift ban on Twitter?
To lift the ban?
No, the suspension of Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, when is Nigerians are expecting when the government will lift the ban? And two, how are you going to resolve the crisis in the Southeast?
Well, Southeast, I was encouraged by what I heard. Nobody told me. 2 statements from the South. One by elderly people.
Southeast.
No, South.
South.
Yes, by elderly people. They said this time around there will be no access to sea. I'm sure you will understand what they mean. Again, the youth made the same statement. That encouraged me. So that IPOB is just like a dot in a circle. If they want to exist, they would have no access to anywhere. And the way they are spread all over the country, having businesses, having property, I think IPOB doesn't know what they are talking about. In any case, we said we'll talk to them in the language they understand. We'll organize the police and the military to pursue them. That's what we can do. And we will do it.
What about Twitter?
Twitter? That I will give to myself. Well, thank you very much for thinking that I'm okay. I have never abandoned my farm. I still have got a number of cattle. And when I leave, I will be going to my farm daily. I will try and keep myself busy. Between now and then, I will try to keep on convincing Nigerians that I mean very well.
And that's President Buhari there, and he was talking about a number of things. I think they cross-rolled to something else. The final thing he was talking about, I think, was in response to a question from Tundun Abiola there. What was he going to do after retirement, and he talked about his cattle. In any case, with me in the studio, Arise News analyst Mahmud Jega, the former editor of the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, Dr. Austin Maho, currently facilitator at the National Open University of Nigeria, and from our Overflow studio, the public affairs analyst Chibuzo Okereke, convener of the National Political Equity Movement in Nigeria. Thank you for staying with us. And I'll come to you, Mahmud Jega. Apologies, we had to go on a break.
Okay.
But we were talking generally about the sense that people got from this interview. Do you feel that the way he's handling things, or how do you feel about the way he's handling things in Nigeria after this interview? Do you feel more or less confident?
The actions that will follow from the interview, I think, as Dr. said, in many cases he reiterated what is the visible stance of the government in the weeks to come. In several cases he did better in offering explanations that had not been heard before. And in several other cases, he withheld information, especially to do with Twitter and even with the details of security response to the bandits and the others. But you see, many of the statements are open to interpretation. Like you said, the statement about IPOB being a dot in a cycle could be interpreted one way, but I think what he was also trying to do was to isolate IPOB from the general community.
Yeah, but the problem there, and I don't think it was intentional.
Yeah.
I think it was simply a matter of the use of language, because he said that IPOB have property all over Nigeria.
Yeah, he
and
meant
that
the larger
populace.
community, exactly.
But you have to be very careful if you're the president, because I mean, what you say can be interpreted in various. But please,
you are right. You are right. He didn't make the separation very clear, but you see the whole purpose by saying there were some encouraging statements that he had from elders and from youth in the south-south zone. He was corrected at the southeast, but he insisted it was south-south, and also this reference about having property all over the country. Obviously, he's referring to the southeastern people generally. And he also talked about how if Nigeria were to split into smaller republics, we wouldn't get due recognition from international investors. So the whole purpose was to isolate the IPOB elements by showing that their agitation is not really in the interest of the larger...
It doesn't fit, certainly, even in the region, because the region are people who go out to sort of, you know, they do business, they need the correct environment, that sort of thing. And insecurity isn't going to help, is it?
Yeah, so really that's the purpose. So while he is now trying to go for reconciliation with the larger community and isolate the IPOB elements with delivering the same threat of the language that they understand, maybe it could have been a bit sharper, but I think that was his general intention.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree with you. Let me bring Mr. Okereke in, who's in our Overflow studio. Thank you for patiently staying with us. What about the issue of restructuring? I mean, he didn't really tackle that question, did he? Nduka Obeibuna asked him a question on that, and he seemed rather to sidestep it.
Yeah, I think the president, even the statement he made about confederation should not even be looked at only from point of view of separatist movement. It could also be about this burning issue of devolution of power to the component state or subnational state. So I think the president, even through the party, constituted a committee on the issue of restructuring. The report of that committee has been out for years now. No action has been taken on it. And when you try to reconcile the president's position on restructuring and the effort of the National Assembly during this constitutional review, one begins to wonder whether we are going to have the kind of outcome that will help the country to move forward. So the president doesn't seem to be disposed to the issue of restructuring. But we know that the federal government is overbloated. He admitted that when he talked about the issue of corruption and how that he needs genuine intelligence that are credible before the people will be shown out of the way. When you also look at the general, response of the president towards the issue of restructuring, one can tell that he is not favorably disposed to restructuring at this time. Maybe he's concerned that it could lead to a possibility of Nigeria breaking into a confederation or what have you. But I think that is something that the president should pay attention to. And let me use this opportunity to talk about when the president mentioned that he got intelligence from the Borno State governor on whether Nigerians or non-Nigerians are responsible for the insurgents that are going on. I'm really concerned about the messaging of the president because terrorism that is going on in the Northeast is something that has to do with the national authority, not really state. They can collaborate with state, but saying that Borno State governor is the one providing intelligence for which he uses to determine whether Nigerians or non-Nigerians are responsible for what is going on there is a bit of concern.
Right, okay, that makes sense, that the point. You're nodding vigorously there. What's your reaction to that?
I agree totally with Mr. Okereke. There's something abnormal when you look at all the security architecture that the federal government has deployed in the Northeast over time with one operation or the other. Then the federal government still have to get security update from very, very serious, important security update from the governor of Borno State, as in, who are these Boko Haram members? Are they Nigerians or foreigners? It's baffling when I heard that the first time, but he has thrown more light on it to show that who are those, the question is, who are those really feeding the president with the information he works with? Is it the governor of Borno State or his theater commanders? It should be his theater commanders. They are on ground. They were deployed there. It's just like when the critical question of why he picked on the new army chief, Yahaya, and he answered to the effect that, well, I picked him because he has been a commander. He knows his troop. He knows the ground. He has been there for so many years, months. So we expect you that if you have so much confidence in the commanders you've been appointing over the time, the commanders should be able to give you appropriate information which should form the basis of the policies you are implementing in the Northeast. But this situation, from the answer he gave to that question, it shows that his source of information may be defective. It's good, however, to get information from various sources.
Yeah.
But when you now point at one critical information that you got it from this person, it raises a lot of eyebrows.
I understand the point you're making.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not taking the president's side necessarily, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And I do think that the president has sometimes maybe a little issue with communicating. And perhaps he got that mixed up in the way that he was actually he intended to describe it. That's my assessment. I may be wrong.
Who are these Boko Haram members? It's a very important question because there have been communication from the federal government in the past that most of the people coming into the country to invade us, whether as headsmen or as Boko Haram, are foreigners from Chad and Nigeria Republic.
Right.
So we need to know where our problem is coming from.
He was trying to buttress or support the intelligence he already had by suggesting that. But we've got about a minute before we take a break.
Yeah, well,
Mahmud,
you are right to say that all the security agencies are federal, so ideally the federal government should have more information. But I think specifically about the identity of the Boko Haram people, it is not out of place if the governor seems to know better than the security agencies because he has more access, for example, to the traditional.
And that also
authorities.
supports the idea of having localized police.
Exactly.
That way, because they've got better intelligence in their own regions. We've got to take a break in a moment, but he talked, Mr. Jega, he said that his appointments to federal positions are based on merit, not ethnic balance. But of course, the Nigerian constitution is clear that major appointments should be shared in a way that reflects federal character. So what's your reaction to that? We've got about 30 seconds.
Well, you are right. In 1980, not long after the 1979 Constitution was adopted, there was a major seminar at the NIPS in Jos about this quota system and federal character.
Yeah, okay. I apologize again, but I have to take a break. I'll come back to you and you can finish that thought. Okay. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our analysis of President Buhari's exclusive interview on Arise News. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Enyegolu. Now, in a wide-ranging, exclusive interview with Arise News, Nigeria's President Muhammad Buhari talks about a host of nettlesome issues, but contrary to prevailing perceptions of Mr. Buhari as a ramrod, rather mirthless former military ruler, Mr. Buhari came across as reasonably relaxed. He certainly didn't appear to be fazed or ruffled by the line of questioning from the Arise team. He talked about insecurity, unemployment, the economy, transnational infrastructure, and restructuring. Well, he skirted around that one.
Virtually, local governments are virtually killed. You know it.
Yes, sir.
The 3 tiers of government, federal, state, and local government, if they are being followed properly, we wouldn't have all these social problems. But the problem is the local government have been virtually killed. And that is not good for this country. It's not good for this country because those who became the local government chairman have been compromised. If your local government is, say, entitled or is supposed to receive 300 million, a letter will be prepared for you to sign that you have received 300 million and you are given only 100 million.
Well, still on the Southeast, Mr. President, how do you plan to include more people from the Southeast, and indeed the South in general, to include more people in the Southeast, and indeed the South in general, in your government, especially in security services and MDAs?
You look at, say, NNPC, look at the military. People who have been there for 18 years, or people who have been there, say, for 10 years. They trained in Zaria or in Abeokuta. They come through the ranks. And because they served under all the circumstances, the crisis and everything, and they gradually rise to that status.
Okay, the president cut off in mid-sentence there, but Arise News, of course, exclusive interview with him, and Arise News analyst Mahmud Jega is with me, the former editor of the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, Dr. Austin Maho, currently facilitator at the National Open University of Nigeria, is also here, and from our Overflow studio, the public affairs analyst Chibuzo Okereke, convener of the National Political Equity Movement in Nigeria, is also here. And Mahmud Jega, we were talking before we had to take that break again. We were talking about the appointments to federal positions. He said they were based on merit, not ethnic balance, and we were making the point that the Nigerian constitution is clear that major appointments should be shared in a way that reflects federal character.
You are right. You see, you can defend one particular appointment. If you say, I appointed this man as army chief because he was the theater commander of Lafayette Dole, that's okay. That sounds quite reasonable. But the question is, you see, the overall balance. As you said, the Constitution mandates federal character, and I was referring to the major seminar that took place at NIPS in 1980, where many people argued, but then the 1999 Constitution was new. They said, no, we must have merit also. We can't have quota and federal character. And major arguments were made by many professors, including Professor Godwin Shogolo, who said, for example, that any system that helps to establish peace and balance within a federal system is the most appropriate for the system. If in the so-called pursuit of merit, all the appointments are slanted so that some parts of the federation are disaffected, then honestly you are destabilizing the policy. So he said the standard that we came around to after balancing is the highest standard. There is no standard higher than that. So don't say we have lowered standard through balancing. So as the president said, merit is extremely important, and in NNPC or in the military or anywhere, you can't bring somebody from outside the military and make him army chief, certainly. But even within the army, a conscious effort has to be made to establish some balancing in order to stabilize the federation and remove accusations of lopsidedness.
And even stabilization within the army, because you can certainly have restive elements as a result of that. But let me bring you in, Dr. Maho there. He also talked about corruption. That was another talking point, one of the main planks of his campaign. What's your sense of how he tackled that issue in the interview?
You know, when it comes to the issue of corruption, normally we'll say that Buhari administration came in on three planks: anti-corruption, economy, and of course, the war against insurgency or insecurity. In all three, we can say Buhari has not done very well. And when you talk about corruption, the way he responded shows that he himself knows that he has not done well in terms of fighting corruption in the country. He has done the record of corruption. Many people will tell you that corruption in the country now is even much higher than it was in the last administration. For instance, Shego Adeni asked him one question, which we equally have to pay attention to, when he made a comment about when people come to APC, their sins are forgiven. What was his response to that? And what he said later seems to affirm that, when he said that anybody who wants to become president of the country in 2023 should join the APC. It tells a lot.
Yeah, but I think he said that in a jocular manner.
At times, joke tells what is actually.
But even though, I mean, he would say that though, wouldn't he? I mean, he's part of the APC.
Okay. Let's say the governor of Cross River State and Umahi of Ebonyi State, they've gotten the memo. Purposely, that's why they cross-carpeted to APC. But be that as it may, I feel that his anti-corruption move have not recorded the kind of successes we expected. He has been flip-flopping. You look at institutions that at times when we look at the Buhari administration, what actually has Buhari put in place or done to fight corruption in this country? You compare his administration to that of Obasanjo, for instance. Obasanjo put the institution in place and tried to, enforce his anti-corruption drive through this institution. Buhari has not done much when it comes to building institutions to fight corruption, but rather relying on existing institutions, which he has not used to the optimum.
Right. Okay. Let me bring Chibuzo Okereke, who is in our overflow studio, and we're getting to the end of the chat, Mr. Okereke. So clarity on some issues, but not all issues from this interview, or no clarity at all. How do you sum it up?
I think that, like I said, the president missed the opportunity. He didn't speak as though the president was talking to inspire the nation and give hope. And across moments, he kept comparing his administration effort to past administration before he came in. And that, I think, is a wrong comparison. He should be speaking to the bar he set for himself, where he wanted to take Nigeria to, and be analyzing how far he has gone in taking Nigeria to that place. comparing what he's doing with what we had before he came, will never give a fair assessment even to himself, not to talk about Nigeria. So I think, like my colleagues have said, both doctors, that the president didn't come across to, give the right answers to most of the questions. The presidency connotation on the president before now, he retained it during this interview. He didn't differentiate because before now, people have started talking about we now have the presidency, not the president. Coming to this interview, we should have seen the president being clear on certain issues, especially when he was asked about the resolution, the Asaba declaration. He didn't provide any clear answer. He just said that he told them to go and sort out their areas before.
So basically,
now. So
there was, I'm sorry to interrupt you, there was clarity on some issues, but not on all issues. Chibuzo Okereke, Dr. Austin Maho, and Dr. Mahmud Jega, thank you very much indeed to all three of you. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.